When you think of the 20th century, what comes to mind? Probably the World Wars, right? Or maybe the Roaring Twenties, the Cold War. But what if I told you the blueprint for all of that, the tech, the culture, the crazy speed of modern life, was actually drawn up in one single, chaotic, and totally overlooked decade? Yep, we're talking about the 1900s. We're going to see how those first 10 years didn't just kick off a new century, they basically invented the future as we know it.
And this really says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the clash of the era. On one side, you've got the 19th century, all formal, buttoned up, and stuck in its ways. And on the other, bam! The 20th century just explodes onto the scene. It's a blur, it's innovation, it's the impossible happening right before your eyes. That entire decade was just one big collision between these two worlds.
So, let's set the scene. As the century kicks off, the vibe is just incredibly optimistic, especially in America. People truly believed in progress with a capital P. The idea that science and industry were just going to keep making life better and better forever. It was this age of supreme confidence. But they were also standing right on the edge of a monumental shift.
And then, in 1901, you get the perfect symbol for that shift. When Queen Victoria died, it wasn't just the end of a long reign. It was like a funeral for an entire way of looking at the world. I mean, for 63 years, she was the era. Empire, industry, all those strict rules. Her death left this huge vacuum, and suddenly it felt like the old rulebook was thrown out. And into that void rushed this tidal wave of new ideas, new ambitions, and, yeah, new anxieties too. So, what filled that empty space? Well, more than anything else, it was technology. And we're not just talking about cool new gadgets here. This was a total rewiring of society itself. It fundamentally changed how people talked to each other, how they saw the world, and even how they got from point A to point B.
Let's just quickly run through 4 innovations that absolutely changed everything. We're talking about creating a wireless world, capturing a moment in time, making pictures move, and, this is a big one, creating the very first mass audience for entertainment.
Okay, first up, the wireless world. In 1901, this guy, Guglielmo Marconi, did something incredible. He sent a radio signal, just the letter S in Morse code, all the way from England to Canada. Think about that. In a split second, the Atlantic Ocean just disappeared as a barrier to communication. For the very first time, information could leap across the globe instantly, with no wires. The world just shrank in a huge way.
All right, next, capturing the moment. Before this little box, the Kodak Brownie, photography was this super formal, expensive thing only pros could do. But the Brownie? It cost $1. Suddenly, anyone could be a photographer. It took the power to record history away from the fancy studios and put it right into the hands of regular people. Your life, your family, you could now tell your own story with pictures. And then, pictures started to move. Early films were kind of boring, just showing, a train arriving at a station. But a French filmmaker named Georges Méliès, he had a much bigger idea. His 1902 film, A Trip to the Moon, proved that movies weren't just for looking at reality. No, they were a machine for creating new realities. You're literally seeing the birth of fantasy and special effects right here, the language of movies being invented. So where did you go to see these amazing new films? You went to a place like this, the Nickelodeon. It cost just 5 cents, a nickel, to step into a dark room and get whisked away to another world. These little theaters popped up everywhere, in storefronts, you name it. And just like that, cinema became the first real mass entertainment for everybody, especially working-class folks. But if you want to talk about the ultimate engine of change from this decade, it's got to be the assembly line. You know where Henry Ford got the idea? From watching pig carcasses get taken apart with incredible efficiency in Chicago's meatpacking plants. He just reversed the process for his Model T. And in doing so, he didn't just build a car, he invented a whole new way of making everything. And look at the result. This is just incredible. In 1908, a Model T would set you back $825. Fast forward just 8 years, and thanks to mass production, the price plummets to $360. The car went from being a toy for the rich to a tool for the average family. It was like distance itself became available to everyone. Now, all this crazy technological acceleration, it didn't happen in a bubble. It had a soundtrack, it had a new look, the culture was changing just as fast, and it had the exact same disruptive, buzzing energy. That soundtrack? It was ragtime, and its secret ingredient was something called syncopation. Basically, syncopation messes with your head. Instead of a nice, steady beat, 1, 2, 3, 4,
It shoves the accent just off the beat. It creates this ragged rhythm that feels like it's constantly pushing forward. It's exciting. And for the old guard, who were used to neat and tidy marches, it sounded, well, kind of threatening. It was the sound of a world that just wouldn't play by the old rules.
And it wasn't just music, as the Library of Congress puts it. It was an attitude. Ragtime's energy, it perfectly captured the speed and the jittery feeling of the new century. It was the absolute perfect soundtrack for a world changing at lightning speed.
You can see that exact same shift happening in fashion. Look on the left, that's the 19th century ideal. This super rigid S-bend corset that creates this really artificial pigeon-chested shape. But then look on the right. By the end of the decade, things are already loosening up. The shape is getting straighter, more like a tube. It's a subtle change, for sure, but it's a clear step away from restriction and toward the freedom and practicality that would dominate the next century.
But it wasn't all progress and optimism. The decade was also hit by a series of massive shocks, events that just shattered those old beliefs and showed everyone how unstable things really were right under the surface.
And some of those shocks were, well, literal. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake was way more than a natural disaster. It was a huge psychological blow. It was this terrifying reminder that all that steel, all that concrete, all that modern confidence, it could all turn to dust in a second. It was like nature stepping in to say, hey, don't forget who's really in charge here.
And the political ground was shaking just as hard. These weren't just random events. They were tremors running along the fault lines of the old world. You have a U.S. president assassinated in 1901, revealing just how tense society was. You have Russia's Bloody Sunday massacre, which basically lit the fuse for a revolution. All the while, wars in far-off places were shifting who had power on the world stage. All those things people thought were set in stone, turns out they were dangerously fragile.
But maybe the biggest shock of all didn't come from an earthquake or an assassin's bullet. It came from the mind of one person. In 1905, a young patent clerk in Switzerland, a guy named Albert Einstein, published a few papers. And those papers completely turned our understanding of space, time, and energy on its head. It was the ultimate intellectual earthquake. And this, of course, is the part everyone knows. This simple little equation from his theory of relativity, it revealed a secret about the universe that was both terrifying and incredibly powerful, that mass and energy are basically the same thing. It meant a tiny speck of matter held a colossal amount of energy just waiting to be unlocked. He'd found the power source hidden inside the atom itself, and that discovery would shape the rest of the century in both wonderful and terrible ways. So you take all this, the tech, the culture, the shocks to the system, and you put it all together, you start to see that this wasn't just a random bunch of stuff happening. This was it. This was the moment the future slammed into the present.
And maybe there's no better symbol for the whole decade than the Wright Brothers' flight in 1903. Think about it. For all of human history, we were stuck on the ground. And then, for 12 whole seconds on a windy beach in North Carolina, we weren't. An ancient, impossible dream became a real, mechanical fact. Suddenly, the sky wasn't the limit anymore.
When you get right down to it, the systems that run our lives today, they were all born in the 1900s. Mass production, which changed how we make things. Mass transportation, changing how far we can go. Mass media, changing what we think and what we dream about. And yeah, even the potential for mass destruction, thanks to that new physics. This decade didn't just come before the modern world, it literally delivered it to our doorstep.
Which brings us to one last question to think about. That first decade of the 20th century, it unleashed a pace of change the world had never, ever seen. It gave us flight, instant communication, a world moving at the speed of a machine. So the question is, 100 years later, have we, our minds, our societies, ever really caught up to the world that was born in those 10 crazy, turbulent years?